I get a lot of questions from folks that they would like answered looking at it through the value creation lens. I'm basically applying my holistic value creation principles, material, emotional, and spiritual value being created and doing all that stuff in balance. And one of the recent questions was, how can I 10x my income in 2025? And I'm thinking, wow, that's interesting. I don't believe in shortcuts or hacks to do that kind of stuff. There's always a way to gamble. And I don't recommend that for most people because most people can't afford to lose the money, and you can get lucky, but the odds are typically stacked significantly against you. But it really goes back to this foundation. Where are you starting from? And when I think back on the value that I've created, if we're just talking about material value here, I have had years where I significantly more than 10x'd my income in a year, coming off a year making over $1 million. But it took me decades to build a foundation to do it. And it started early on as a kid, doing jobs for neighbors, paper routes, working in restaurants, teaching guitar lessons, playing in a band, working in a general fabrication shop, buying a company for its debt, no cash in. What a scary time, but also super exciting. And it worked out, and it's led to 8 additional companies that I built. And with that foundation along the way, I was able to sell a few of them and make significant income, as well as years not selling the companies, having pretty large jumps in there too. But it was all about building this foundation. And so when people ask that question, they're always looking for this hack or quick way to do it. Well, I don't think there really is. And I think it really depends on that foundation that you build. I do look back and I often say, and I believe this, that had I embraced the right peer advisory groups, mentors, coaches, I could have gone significantly faster. I feel like I reinvented the wheel over and over and over again, and I really didn't have to. But then I even question that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe as part of my journey, I had to do all of that to create the value that I did materially. And I look at a number of other folks out there that are, for decades, they're in peer advisory groups, always looking for the next coach, reading lots of books, and yet they don't really accelerate their material value creation, the value of their business or whatever else they're doing. So what's the difference? And I think the difference is from day one for me, and this is something I recommend for every business leader and really everybody that has a career, I've always leaned in to create as much value as I can, super curious, listening to the customers, what's going on, how can I improve it? If I lose a customer, what can I do to earn it back? Thank you so much for trusting us for as long as you did, but how can I earn it back? Just always learning on that front edge of creating as much value as possible. And I look at these other folks that are looking for the shortcut. They're really not leaning fully in to create that value. And I think that's the difference. I believe it's really important to be reading, studying, learning, mentors, the right peer advisory groups, not just for the sake of having them, but really learning to allow you to connect dots faster when it comes to creating value. But if you're always looking for that shortcut, I think that's going to be an issue, long-term for you. And there's a few peer advisory groups out there that I've been exposed to. Some are amazing and they're about creating value, and others, a couple I'm thinking of right now, all the members seem to continually boast about how little they're working and how much money they're making by working as little as possible. So that's the whole culture. How can we do as little as we can, make as much money as we can for doing, again, as little work for our customers as possible? So to me, that's just crazy. And that's not a healthy culture. It's not a value creation culture. It's what I call sort of a rigging the game culture. And so I wonder if we turned it around on all these people. They're boasting about how much money they're making for doing as little as possible. What if everybody they spent their money on in terms of providing goods and resources back to them had the same mentality? We're going to charge you as much as we possibly can, and we're going to do as little as we possibly can for it. I can assure you that all of these folks, the vast majority of everybody that I've ever met, want the most value for their dollar that's spent, and they wouldn't want people to treat them the way they're boasting about, approaching the world and how they make money. So again, I think there's just this giant difference between leaning in to always create more value, build a solid foundation that you can grow over time. And I highly recommend, that this short here is really talking about material value creation. But if you want to accelerate that even more, really optimize it, I highly recommend building alongside it emotional energy value and connectedness or spiritual value. And I think, as a number of you have heard me say before, it takes just as much time to build emotional energy value and spiritual or connectedness value as it does to create material value. But if you're doing all three in balance, it always, at least for me anyway, and examples that I've seen with others, almost always increases the material value creation even faster. So I think, this is really a question for any of us out there. Are you more in the camp of leaning in, being on the front lines, creating value, enjoying that? Or are you looking for the easy route, the hack, the simple way to make as much money as possible with doing as little as possible? I'm for the first. I'm definitely not for the latter. Which approach are you taking? Every so often, I want to revisit the fundamentals of value creation. So the way I think about it is holistic value creation. Most people, when they hear the word value, they're thinking about money. How much money can I make? What can I produce in my company to generate profit, etc. But when I think about value creation and apply it in the world, it's holistic value creation,